Okay, let me get back on the screen. So hi, everybody. Welcome to our drone meetup for February 2025. So today we're going to look at WinTAK. We've done quite a bit of TAK lately. I think the only one that I haven't done is the iOS one. But WinTAK was sitting out there and I thought, I didn't want to treat it like the red-headed stepchild, so we want to make sure that everything's okay. So the agenda is whatever news. There's been lots of news. I'm not going to talk about too much, but we'll talk about some of it. An intro to WinTAK. We'll talk about plugins in WinTAK. And then I have, this is kind of similar to how we did the ATAK plugin meetup a few months ago. I thought I'd do the same thing. Somebody on LinkedIn basically poked me and asked me, was I doing any C#? And I thought, I probably should just do the same thing again. So we have a really basic plugin, which is how you get the environment set up. It's not really anything more, the Hello World plugin. And then I'm going to do a drone plugin, which is basically taking the lat long from a simulator from Gazebo running PX4, and then we just display it in the pullout panel for our drone plugin example. And I'll talk about I have a whole bunch of references and a couple of videos to show, so you can get this stuff up and running yourself. Okay, so what news? So, like I said, apologies for not making it in December, January. Just my teaching schedule just got in the way, and I really didn't have any time to do anything. So we're going to look at how to add a plugin in WinTAK. So far, over the last couple of years, we've done sessions in ATAK, TAK server, and now WinTAK. So later in the year, we'll probably look at TAK on iOS devices, and I haven't really done much with that, so I'm looking forward to that. So the industry news since we met last year was there are no more fly zones on DJI drones, which is kind of huge. I know we really didn't have them on other drones, but certainly they would get in the way when we were trying to do stuff. So I know that there's security reasons why people think it's a good idea, but from a developer perspective, it's certainly going to make my life easier. And then, of course, there was the New Jersey drone mania, which got a lot more people interested in remote ID. That seems to have died down now, thankfully. So I'm not really hearing much about that anymore. I'm sure it'll probably rear its ugly head. Haven't heard anything more about the DJI ban. I'm assuming it's going to go ahead. I just don't know what's going on. The tariffs have gone up on DJI drones, as with all other Chinese things. So we're doing a lot more on PX4 type drones. Oh, and we joined PX4 as well as a whatever the lowest version is on the rank for PX4 sponsors. So we're in there too as well.
Silver member.
Silver member, thank you. And then next month, I'm thinking I might do either a machine learning, or there was a number of months ago, probably well over a year ago, I did one for cattle counting with drones and how to use TensorFlow to do that. So I might just update that again. Or if there's not much, if it's just the same as what it was before, what I might look at doing is to see if you can use GenAI to generate some code for whatever drone stuff that you're trying to do. I have a thought as well, as the hardest thing that you can do in machine learning for drones is to, hold on a second, I'll lose my voice. The hardest thing you can do for machine learning for drones is all the labeling that you have to do with whatever it is that you're trying to detect. And I have a feeling that the vision APIs from OpenAI would probably solve a lot of that issue. So I might look at that too as well. And if anybody has anything else that they want me to look at, I'm more than happy to hear your thoughts. Okay, so what is WinTAK? So WinTAK is like ATAK, but for Windows. Lots of people don't like Android. Lots of people don't have Android devices. So it kind of makes sense that there would be a Windows alternative. The iOS version of ATAK, I've heard, is not great, which I'm guessing is probably because iOS doesn't kind of have that plugin architecture that ATAK has, and also that Windows has, as we'll see. So because of the security restrictions, I'm kind of thinking that plugins don't really work as well with iOS as they do on the Android and the Windows platform. But Windows is a great alternative. WinTAK can be used on more powerful systems than ATAK, so you can have, whatever graphics chip, whatever, 64 gigs of RAM or whatever it is you want, which is much harder to do on an ATAC phone. And probably just as an Android phone, and probably just as cheap as the similar thing that you get on Android. So we're working with WinTAK Civ, which is the version available to the general public. That is on tac.gov. The same as what we did with the Android side. Okay. So how does it all fit together? So what do we have as our WinTAK architecture? And I'm not going to go into how you would use WinTAK. I'm just really going to go straight into how to do the plugins, because this is a software meetup rather than a show and tell. So apologies if that doesn't suit everybody, but that's what we're going to do tonight. So what do we got to play with? Well, it's .NET and it's C#. Okay. It's kind of an older version of .NET. So it runs on the .NET Foundation 4.8.1, which is, in software terms, is pretty old, 2022. The current version is and lots of folks are actually using the .NET 9 preview. So 4.8.1 is kind of a while ago. .NET Foundation went to .NET Core, and then it went back again. So there's been quite a few things that have happened since that time. However, Visual Studio hasn't really changed that much since 2022. Still using Visual Studio 2022. I'm just using the Community Edition, but nothing here. So we have a modular plugin architecture with the managed extensibility framework. So that gives us our dependency injection, which allows us to do the dynamic plugin loading. So we can basically, just like you do on Android, you can take in your plugins, load them on top of your WinTAK, and whether you want to use all of them at the same time or or unload them and load them, it's very similar to how you would do it on ATAC. Because we're in the .NET world, we have lots of NuGet integration. So a lot of the things that you want to do, a lot of the packages that you would need, NuGet allows you access. So we're using Prism, Prism.mef and Prism.core, which allows us to get the very similar view that you would see from WinTAK as you would see in ATAC. So we got the map on the left-hand side, and then we got the drag out panels on the right-hand side, which is map and then whatever contextual information that you want. So very similar to what we say.
Godfrey, we got a comment from the chat from JR. iTech is developed by a different company. Plugin ecosystem, to my knowledge, is only baking in commonly used plugins.
Commonly used plugins. Yeah. I'm thinking that just because of how iOS works, that it's not surprising that they just use the commonly used plugins, which for drone developers kind of sucks, because it means that I could be wrong. I haven't looked into it yet. It means that we're kind of locked out of doing it. But I don't know. It'll be a future month. We'll see what happens. But thanks for your comment. Yeah, and if you do have any comments, just write it in the chat, and then I'm happy to answer it when Mike points out that I've missed it for the last 5 minutes. Okay. So we got all the UI components, and then WPF, which is the platform foundation, I think. So for me, that's just XAML files. So there was a time, we are talking like quite a while ago now, where you would basically, whether you were using MAUI or any of the components for mobile development, you would basically be doing them in these XAML files, XAML files. And we're doing the same here now. So that's basically what we're building everything on it. And also we've got all the similar kind of messaging and geospatial features that we're familiar with ATAC. Okay. So how do I get it? So you have to go to tac.gov, go to the product page for WinTAK Civ. And then if we're going to be doing developer plugins, don't look at the first download. You basically have to scroll down to the bottom, and you get to see a couple of things there. So we have our developer resources. So the two things that we have here, I did this over the last few days. I redid it over the last few days. So I'm using the latest version of the WinTAK SDK, which is 5.3. And also you need the WinTAK templates, the VSIX file, which is the Visual Studio extension package. So essentially what you do is you install WinTAK, so that's the application itself, similar to ATAC, and then we install that. And then when we install the templates allows us to be able to create our own templates. So it gives us all the things that we need in order to be able to start playing with the plugins. I will say that it was a little bit more obscure about how to get everything running. So I did this on a fresh machine today to try and make sure that I had everything. Because it's always the same with C#. It's not as obvious unless you're a C# junkie. So there's and all of the information that I have came from a couple of resources, a couple of links that I put in the resources from people who've gone through this a few times. So I am indebted to their help because otherwise we wouldn't be having this talk tonight. Okay. Okay, so what we do is going to download these two. We're going to install WinTAK, and then we're going to install the templates, the VSIX file. Currently, there's only 5 plugins that I could find on tac.gov for WinTAK, which doesn't really strike me as being a very huge ecosystem. Although there's Jean Helicandra, he's got a great repo. That's one of the persons who helped me. And what he's trying to do is recreate the ATAC Hello World plugin. And I got a caution when we say Hello World. So usually for me, Hello World is usually the most basic thing that you can do. But in the ATAC world, and this happens a couple of times in the drone world, somebody doesn't really understand what Hello World means. So the ATAC Hello World plugin is all things that you could possibly do with ATAC, and it's an amazing resource. So this Jean Helicandra has basically tried to recreate that for WinTAK. So that's great. So that means if you're trying to do something with WinTAK, that would be the first place you would go to try and see how you would do ad layouts, integrate cameras, all that sort of thing. So he's done recreated a lot of what they have on the massive Hello World plugin from ATAC and put it into WinTAK. And then I would suggest searching on GitHub, hunting out there to see if you can find other WinTAK plugins, because there's a few out there. There's not a huge amount in comparison to other languages, but there's definitely at least a dozen or so. Okay, so once you've installed WinTAK, this which is we see the same kind of thing that we would see in ATAC. So you have the screen here. So this would be our map. We're on developer build, and then over here we have this panel which we just pull out, and that displays contextual information. And this is the second plugin that we're going to do, although we will have some numbers coming up. Which is just showing the lat long. So we're going to do take the telemetry from Mavlink and then just display it within this panel here. So as you can see, it's very similar to what we have. We're on the plugins tab on the ribbon because we're in the Windows world. We're going to call this a ribbon at the top, and then we just we can manage our plugins, bring stuff in and out as we want to, and then display it when it makes most sense for whatever we're trying to do. For our first responders. Okay. So WinTAK plugins. What's the purpose of plugins? So they extend WinTAK's basic functionality, allowing developers to tailor the platform to whatever specific operational needs you have. ATAC plugins are not compatible with WinTAK. I don't know if that's obvious to you folks or not. So one is written in Java or Kotlin now. Any of the new ones that we write on ATAC are on Kotlin, and then the other one is in WinTAK is in C#. So it's just it's the same but different. And like we said, the ecosystem's not quite as developed as ATAC, but it is C#. So if you are trying to do stuff, there's no reason why you couldn't go to Helicandra's repo, have a look at what's going on, and then create the same yourself. All of this stuff is pretty easy to get up and running. Okay, so what do we need for our developer environment? So we need Visual Studio 2022. We want to make sure that we're installing the .NET Framework 4.8.1. We want the two things that we just downloaded, which are the WinTAK SDK Development Edition, and then the WinTAK Visual Studio plugin template, the VSIX file. So installing it's pretty easy. So we basically click on the .NET desktop platform. It gives you all this stuff. I've noticed in the last few days that we're getting a lot more GitHub Copilot there. It's fine. You may as well install it. It might be helpful if you're trying to to ask it some questions. The only problem with GitHub Copilot is it works really well for Java or C#, but it doesn't work well for an ecosystem that it's not used to. So if it can't, it's been trained mostly on GitHub repos. So if it doesn't have a lot of GitHub repos to be trained on, it's not going to answer your questions as well as it would do if you're asking how to do something in React Native or HTML. But it's worth a try. Okay, so gotta make sure that that's, so we install our SDK, so that's the first download. And then the second download was the VSIX file. So you double click on that, and then it will basically walk you through an installation wizard to make sure that you have everything working. So that's the first stage. Okay, so what we're going to do first, we're going to do two plugins. We're going to just basically do the out of the box stuff that you get with the template, and then this is just our simple hello world, which does absolutely nothing. But what it does is it makes sure that we have all of the different components of our development environment installed properly. And then if we get everything up and running, we should be able to see something like this. So I'm based in Detroit, hence why we're seeing the map here. Okay, so the goal is to create our panel in here in the plugins tab, so this little the Hello World plugin, and a side panel that opens when clicking the button. But our real goal is to make sure that we have everything working together, and there are some hoops that we're going to have to jump through. Nothing difficult, but just hoops. So here's the steps that we have. We have to create the project using the WinTAK template. We have to set up the local NuGet dependencies, which was the thing that took me a couple of hours to figure out. Thanks again to one of the repos. We have to make sure that we're using the .NET Framework 4.8.1. We have to change the startup action to use plugins. So the way that it works in Android is that you basically have the basic ATAK, and then you install the plugin on top of ATAK. And because it's using a plugin architecture, you tell it to go for the main activity, and it pulls that up from ATAK, which is great. In Windows, what we basically have to do is we have to say, hey, we're a plugin. You got to start WinTAK when you're doing this. So we're a little bit more explicit about how we do this. So we start WinTAK, click start in Visual Studio. And this is nothing to do with Visual Studio Code, by the way. This is Visual Studio old school. Enable your plugin, and then click on the plugins in the ribbon tab. Sounds pretty straightforward. All right, so open Visual Studio 2022. We're going to create a new project. Because I've installed the WinTAK plugin, you can find it. If you haven't used it before, you're going to have to search for templates and type in WinTAK, making sure that you've got the case correct, and it will find it. There's hundreds of things in here that it wants to do, console apps, whatever. So we're going to use our WinTAK plugin. Like I said, if it doesn't appear in the most recent project templates, just search for WinTAK templates and choose that. Okay. The project, when you run it, it won't be able to find the prism.mef files or the prism core files, and it won't be able to find the WinTAK packages. So we have to point the app, because it's looking at NuGet. So basically, the way the Visual Studio is set up is it's always going to go out to NuGet.org to find whatever packages you want. But we've just installed our packages with our Visual Studio extensions package, the VSIX file. And then what we need to do is we need to be able to point at that on our local hard drive. So what you do is you go to Tools, you get Package Manager, go to your Package Manager settings so that we can point it at the right directory, which is WinTAK/NuGet. So you basically click on the plus here, and then go to the WinTAK folder. I'm just in the default folder here, which is Program Files WinTAK. And then you choose NuGet, and the packages are installed there, and you should be good to go. If they're still not showing up, just do a build clean and then rebuild the solution, and then usually errors will go away. Make sure that you do it within package sources. Okay. All right, so now we should be okay in Visual Studio. We should be able to have no errors. It's just, it's installed a little bit of code for us. We got to do a couple of things. We got to make sure that it's using the right framework. So we want to make sure that the framework is 4.8.1. It won't work with 4.8. Give it, whatever it's called. I think this is but yeah, this is the second one. So the first one will just be hello world. And then the second thing that we have to do is we have to tell it what to do when we build. So when we build, because we don't really have anything, we don't really have a project that works. We don't have a user interface. It's not a command line tool. We have to tell it to start an external program. So it's going to start wintak.exe. So you got to browse and get there. And then you got to have a working directory. I just use the default, which is program files wintak. So, and the way you do this is you go to properties in your Visual Studio, and then you basically change application and debug, and then it's all set. And then now we can build. So when we build, you should see because we've put the start action as to start WinTAK, it will start WinTAK on its own. And then once it starts WinTAK, you should see something that says new plugin discovered, which in this case is just our hello world. And if you click the checkbox to enable the plugin, it should show up. Things to look out for would be the NuGets. That was the one that stopped me from proceeding for a little while. And if all else works, then you should be able to click on the plugins at the top, see the Hello World plugin, and be able to see this at the side. So not very exciting, but at least we know that our development is working. So everything is working and building correctly. Okay, so because this is a drone meetup, a drone software meetup, I thought that we needed to do something that was related to drones. So for the second plugin, we're going to repeat what we did in the ATAK plugin session a few months ago. So we're going to use Mavlink and a simulator to show the lat long of a drone as it's flying. So the goal now is to build off the template that we just did, but we're going to display the longitude and latitude in the panel, and we're going to read in the longitude and latitude from a drone simulator running the background. So this is PX4, Gazebo, and then QGC that we have running, and then it's running in a settle environment, software in the loop environment, no hardware. No reason you couldn't use hardware, but we're just not doing this in this example. And then we're going to show the lat long here. And as anybody who uses QGC, it's going to show up in Switzerland, which I think is where Otirian is, where the Mavlink folks are. Okay. So how do we do this? Similar to what we did before. We're going to run through the same things, a little bit different. So we're going to set up a Sittle drone simulator. We're going to install and configure QGC. Just going to copy the code. I will walk through the code a little bit, but for the moment, we're just going to git clone it. And whatever code that I have tonight, it's available on this repo. Open the project in Visual Studio, build and run the project, and then open the side panel and start the simulator. So this one gets a little bit more complicated. I did try to get the Docker install for PX4 working, but I couldn't get it to work. So we're going to go back to square one, and we're just going to do everything from basics. So you need WSL. So WSL, Windows Systems Library. So that's basically Linux on our Windows. So you got to make sure that you have that on your machine. If you don't have it, it's really easy. It's WSL from PowerShell, WSL -- install, and then you now have Ubuntu on your machine. So a couple of things to do when you start your WSL. You want to make sure that you do sudo apt update, sudo apt upgrade to make sure that everything's up and running. Otherwise, everything is as current as possible. Otherwise, you're going to run into issues. So do a git clone for the PX4 repo. Make sure you have the recursive at the end. And then we're going to cd into the PX4 autopilot. And then we're going to basically run it by saying bash tools setup ubuntu.sh. And if everything works, you should be able to see, you should be able to have a working version of PX4, and then we'll be able to get our Gazebo up and running. And then we'll be able to have some fake lat longs available to us so that we can use the Mavlink library on our C# Visual Studio project to be able to see what those lat longs are coming from the simulator. Okay. So the last thing that we need is we also need the IP address from our WSL, because it's going to be different from whatever our PC is. And we need to be able to configure QGC to point at the right IP address. The developer was helping me do this before. He said that you have to restart WSL. I didn't find you had to, but if you are finding issues, might make sense to just shut down WSL and then start it again. So next thing that we need to do is install and configure QGround control. So we're using QGround control as a bridge between the simulator and the plugin in WinTAK. So QGC will connect to the simulator in WSL and forward Mavlink messages where our plugin will be listening for them. So under use the IP address we found in WSL. So if you do IP address, it's going to come up with two addresses. The local host, the one that you need is this 172.26. So make sure that you're using that. And then when you start QGround control, when you start it, you basically choose application settings, go under comlinks, and then we're just going to call it WSL. Port is 18570. This is the IP address that I'm using. Make sure that you do add before you close this, because if you do OK, it doesn't do anything, doesn't add it. So you have to do add server and then do OK. And then we should be set up to be able to communicate to our simulator from QGround control. Okay. Under application settings again, so we go from comlinks to Mavlink. We want to make sure that it's enabling Mavlink forwarding. So the previous one was connecting to the simulator, and now we're forwarding those Mavlink messages to our Visual Studio project. And we are on localhost 14445, which is the default, but you just got to make sure that you check this because it's not checked by default. Okay, going to clone the repository. So off to GitHub, git clone the repo, which is publicly available on my repo. Open the solution in Visual Studio, and then everything that we're going to see really is going to be happening in this docpane.cs. We also need to install some Mavlink files so that we can talk to QGC and get the lat long. Not really much going on module, but we'll talk about the code as we go through it. Okay, if when you run this and it's not picking up WinTAK or Prism, just go through the same thing that I showed you earlier on, but if you about how to see the NuGet. Sorry, just got to admit somebody else. Okay, there we go. Welcome, Naga. And then, but if you do it once, you really shouldn't have to do it again, because all it's doing is you're just telling it to look at the local drive instead of just nuget.org. So you should be okay. But if you don't see it, that's what you need to do. Okay, so now so we have a couple of things that we're going to do. So within views, we want to edit our view.cs, and then in docpane.cs, we need to edit that too as well. So our view, which is a really exciting panel that we're pulling out, basically all that we're doing is we're just adding a grid to be able to display the lat long, and this is in view.xaml file under our views directory. So if you want to do anything else, what I would really recommend is looking to see at the giant WinTAK Hello World plugin, which is in the resources. So that'll show you how to do lots of other stuff. But basically what you're doing is you're just using whatever C# knowledge that you have and XAML knowledge that you have to be able to display whatever information that you can in the pullout panel. So back into our docpane.cs, which is really where all the magic happens. We're just going to create two internal variables to store the latitude and the longitude. Okay, like I said, all the business logic is in the docpane constructor. So when the pane is created, we start a UDP client on a new thread, and we listen to the port that QGC forwards on a loopback network. And basically, this is just running in a loop to be able to pull in the information. Okay. There is a step to get Mavlink installed, because it's really the Mavlink library that's doing the hard work. We're not really doing an awful lot. Okay, so again, back in docpane.cs, so we're going to receive the packets. We are going to decode the packets and identify what are the GPS, because there's not much information coming back than just the GPS. But what we're going to do is pull out the GPS packet. And we're going to extract the lat long and just put them in our variables that we created earlier. Okay, so how do we get Mavlink installed for our C#. So there's a couple of ways to do this. So Mavlink has a Python command called mavgen, which we can use to generate the communication code, which we just copy into our folder. So, but I think it's the way that the way that I found it was really easy to do was basically to use the little GUI that you get with mavgen. So okay, so what are we trying to do? So we're trying to get the Mavlink communication files and put them in our project. So then that will allow us with our doc pane to be able to talk to QGC and to get the information from the simulator. So let me just break out of this real quick and I'll show you the video, because I wanted to show you how to do this. Okay. Okay, let me make this a bit bigger. Let's increase the speed. Okay, so we're just going to do clone the repo. We're going to install our Python dependencies next. So you just hit the requirements.txt if you're used to Python. Pretty straightforward. I've already installed them. And then we're going to run this map generate. And map generate gives us this. Let me stop it briefly for a second. So map generate gives us this little pop-up thing. So what are we going to do is we are going to browse on the folders here to point at which of the protocols that we want to use. We are going to have an output folder, which is going to be where we are going to output wherever our Mavlink CS files are going to be, our Mavlink library essentially for our C#. We're going to choose the language, which in this case would be C#, and then the protocol should be 2.0. I think I left it as 1.0 here, but you can play with it and figure it out yourself. So we're going to select the definitions file or XML, which is in the message definitions folder. Choose whichever one you want. We should be choosing the qpilot.xml because I think that's what I'm using. And then choose the application for the generated files. Ensure the language is CS for C#, and set the protocol level to 2.0. Okay. Just run through the rest of that. I think this is kind of a Qt that they're doing within Python. And there's a couple of mistakes in here as well. I didn't choose the right versions, but you should be qpilot and you should be 2.0. And then our output directory. And then we go say CS for C#, and we're going to go with 2, and then we generate. Okay. And what that gives us is that will give us these files here. So what have we got so far? We have our doc pane, which is how we are going to talk to QGC. We have our view, which is our incredible. It's not going to show for me, is it? Yeah, which is our incredibly difficult grid here, which just has got a lot long that we're going to display. And then we have our Mavlink code, which is the stuff that we just generated. Basically, that's all we need so far. Okay, let me go back to where I was. I do have a video showing how all this fits together at the end too as well. No, stop you, don't want you. Okay, back within WSL, what we want to do is we want to say make px4 settle, which is what we're trying to do. So it's px4 software in the loop, and then we want to do gz500, which is gazebo. It's the really basic gazebo. So within WSL, you're going to see it run through, and you should be able to see pxh come up, and then the gazebo should appear, and then you know that everything's good. Now, when I ran this, I didn't do a takeoff or anything. I just took whatever lat long it was giving me, and it was changing all the time. So that's fine, but there's no reason why you couldn't start a flight and start pulling in other things. Heading, direction, speed, all that sort of stuff. You could do that. So what we've done is we've started the simulator in WSL using the make px4 settle command. And we now have the simulator working on our WSL. Okay, so now we have to connect to our WSL. So if we go back into QGC, we want to go into comlinks, and we created our WSL earlier on. And then we want to make sure that we connect that. So you got to connect that once the WSL is running. So open QGC, go to application settings, go to comlinks, and click on connect to get QGC connected. And you should see I think you see the ready for takeoff back in the simulator when that happens. But either way. So then we go back into our code, and in our code, we just hit start, and then everything should start. So we go back into Visual Studio, click on start, and we should now see our plugin working, which would look like this. Okay. It will show you the different stuff here. So let me get out of this again. And I'll run the video so I can show you what that looks like, putting it all together. Again, let me speed it up. Okay, so this is running through everything now. So we're creating a project. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Okay, create the project. So this is our blank project. We are going to go into application, make sure it's 4.8.1. Okay, we're going to go to, I didn't talk about allow unsafe code. I didn't have that problem myself, but if you do, then you want to do this. Oh yeah, the other thing is you got to make sure that you save this all the time, because otherwise you're not going to be running. So we're going to program files. We're going to go into WinTAK. We're going to point it at WinTAK, so that's the start thing. And we're just going to choose the same directory for our working directory. Okay. Within our views, we need to go and add our view file. Okay, so I'm just going to copy it over. So you can find this on the GitHub repo. So this is just the lat long grid. Copy the XAML file. Okay. And we go back into our doc panes. Doc panes there's nothing in it right now, so we're going to go to our GitHub repo, and obviously you can just point it at the GitHub repo and it's going to do the same, but I just want to walk through it because I think it's a good example of what we're doing. So we have basically we set up our doc pane, and then we have our loop, which is basically going to say, give me all the lat long messages that I can get. And then we're going to decode each of those messages, and because the maplink packet that's coming back is bigger than what we're actually looking at, we have used we're just going to copy across the maplink stuff that we've got map generate to generate for us. Copy it into the project, and I think we should be good to start now. Yep, start. Takes a few seconds for it to load WinTAK. WinTAK comes up. Go to plugins. We have our plugin manager if we want to load and unload stuff. So that's already loaded. And if we look at that, that's great. Go back to WSL. We're going to start the gazebo. We have QGC, go to comlinks, make sure that we connect to our WSL. Great, we can see everything. Cool. Okay, I thought that was a good way to just go through everything, because I threw a lot of information at you and I just wanted to make sure that you had everything in a single video. The other thing that if you want to make sure that it really is the lat long that you're getting, so if you go into Analyze Tools, if you go to QGround Control, click on the middle one, which is Analyze Tools, go to Mavlink Inspector, you can see what the lat long is, and you can see if it's actually returning what it's supposed to be returning. Okay. And then the last thing is I just want to go through the resources. So we have Under tac.gov, this is where we get WinTAK. Remember to scroll down. This is the Helicandra. This is the Hello World samples. Like I said, this is not. This is the recreation of the ATAC Hello World, which has lots of different things in it. So I would go there if you want to see how to extend what we've done tonight for your own needs. This is the WinTAK plugin example that we've just looked at. This is Kale Torino, who did probably one of the first plugins that was out there, WinTAK plugins. That was really useful for me to go back to see what I was trying to get. One of the reasons why I couldn't get something to work. So it's a good walkthrough. Another good walkthrough. And then this is the generate libraries. So if you want to do the MapGen stuff, that's there too as well for you. Okay, so then let me just go and show you what different resources I have. Okay. Tech.gov. Scroll down, developer resources. There you go. This is the Helicandra one, the Hello World sample. So layouts, larger, smaller, show icons, map movement, marker manipulation, route examples, emergency examples, drawing examples, GPS, notifications, images and cameras, speech to text. It's all here. So this is worth its weight in gold. This is the really simple setup. So another one looking at, and then if you want to find out more about MapGen, and then here's where Mavlink to as well, where you go to actually download it and then run the Python command to get that little pop-up that I showed you. Okay. With that, I'm going to stop presenting. Okay. Mike, do you want to stop now? And we can open it for questions.
Sure. Yep. Sure.